Hello friends and welcome to the old abandoned bank here in the Peach Capital. I'm glad you're here. In the last 6 weeks since I made a post last, I know many of you have reached out and wondered if we're okay, and we are. We're doing really good, in fact. We've gotten so much done here in the last 6 weeks that I decided to condense a lot of that work and put it into this single video. There'll be more videos to come in the next few days, don't worry, you'll have plenty to watch. I thought it best to condense a lot of that so you can see our progress quickly. My first priority on this building is giving Sarah and I a comfortable place to live in the very near future. My second priority is keeping you abreast of all this work. So I'm glad you're here for it. We're gonna start with the rehabbing of the upstairs original door to the apartment. The door that used to look like this now looks like this. Beautiful. Looks like a brand new door. You'll see how I did the entire project. I've started working on cleaning the walls, preparing those for paint, and our window project where I'll be rehabbing each one of these windows back to its original state. We're going to continue on to some other small projects, but first we're going to begin with one of the oldest projects that we started and finished here in the bank, and probably the nicest so far. That's our outdoor shower. What used to be just a big hole in the wall is now covered by this repurposed door that we found upstairs when we moved in. Sarah picked the color, and it leads to our new outdoor shower space. And this is how it began. Just a big hole in the wall, needed a lot of work. I ended up pulling out about 50 bags of trash. It was the accumulation of many years of dryer lint, debris, people's trash. And just like that, it's all cleaned out. I wanted to paint back here, but I had to clean the walls first. So I pulled out the old power washer and got started. This is one of my favorite projects to work on. I love power washing. I love watching all that stuff just fall right off the walls. It's very satisfying. Made a mess to make it clean. It's looking really good out here, I think. Another satisfying part of the job is when you get all the prep work done, everything's cleaned and ready to paint. I'm using a product from Sherwin called Loxon. It's made for block walls. It allows the brick and the plaster to breathe. After 2 coats of paint on the walls, I began to spray the metal grating in front of the big fan with a semi-gloss enamel. After everything was painted, I framed out the opening in the wall and then used this door that was left in the building. I had to cut it down to fit the size of the opening, and then I painted it with a Sherwin product. It's an oil-based primer and top coat. Using bricks I salvaged from the pile that was left here from this hole in the wall, I made this shapely wall and then filled it with gravel. Once I built the wall initially, I just decided to go up one more level so you can see the process of putting the sand in between each of the bricks just to give a good filler space, and then I used a landscape glue that's made specifically for block to put it all together. I found this big flat stone at a local landscape supply for $15, and then I filled in around it with some of this gravel. It's really comfortable to walk on barefoot. I bought it at the Ace Hardware. It's about $7 a bag. The rest of the space got covered in double shredded black mulch. I like the look of the black mulch in contrast with the plants that we plan to put out here. After I made this trim for the doorway from an old 2x4 I found laying around the building, I felt like it was about time to take a break from this project. One thing you need to do when you're working on a project is take a break every now and again. Around here, one place I like to take a break is Price's Metal Shop in Hardware Store. It's awesome. It's one of those places that you hope you find. And they work on custom things. I had to make a custom couple of pieces for the outdoor shower area. What a cool place. Come check it out. There are parts and pieces for everything here. Take a look at that in a minute, but here's the other shop. It's awesome. Not thick enough. I think that's fine. I mean, yeah, I think that's fine. This one right here, I don't know, I was thinking of splitting it up, just quartering it, cutting that quarter out. I picked out the metal, gave the instructions of what I wanted, and they're working on it already. This place is rad. You know, if I ever had to go work for somebody, I'd probably come to a place like this. I made a diagram of what we needed. Just a couple little awnings for the water heater and the window. And that's what it turned out like. Looks perfect to me. While I finished up some plumbing, Sarah decorated the space with a bunch of her plants. I think she did a great job and it looks awesome. It's looking really nice. We're gonna look for some plants with a little bit of color to add to it. Got this cool rock that some of my good friends gave me. Little spider on there. Throw a couple pieces of quartz down there too. And this is it, the final product. We love it. This instant hot water heater keeps the water extremely hot. It runs the indoor shower as well. And it's run by this propane tank down here, which I've tried to hide a little bit by putting a plant stand on top of it. But all the plants out here are looking really good. Some of the plants that we originally put out here died over the wintertime in the frost, but we were able to source some new ones from Facebook Marketplace locally. It saved a lot of money on that and been able to fill it with a little more color this year. Really enjoying this space. A lot of these plants are just starts, but in a couple of months they're gonna start filling the pots really well. I especially like the quartz rocks. And the way that we have repurposed this old street sign by making shelves that I had Price's Metal Shop cut to put these little plants on. Here's the awnings that I had made custom from Price's Metal Shop. They've been up here for a while, so they've seen a little weather. They're holding up great. This awning weather protects the instant hot water heater that I have plumbed to be controlled by any one of 4 locations. This shower head, and the 2 inside. Now, the water is turned on here or off, and when you want to take a shower, well, all you have to do is turn the knob, or these to adjust heat and pressure. Well, that's it for the outdoor shower. Now let's move on to the restoration of the upstairs door. Hello friends, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm working on a project I've been putting off for a little while. I'm scraping the wall down. I'm going to paint that, and then I'm also working on this door that, due to the hurricane making it very flimsy, well, it's now in total repair mode. This is the original door for this upstairs, as far as I know. Making it new again, kind of newish. We're just taking care of this whole back part of the building. Don't you love it when it comes off in big giant chunks like that? I'm trying to hang out underneath the small amount of protection I have from the rain because it has started coming down pretty good. I'm going to scrape away until it just starts pouring, I guess. It did start raining too hard, so I came inside to assess what kind of work needed to be done on this door frame and transom. I found what looked to be an old doorbell, but turned out to be a lightning arrestor for an old telephone system. Nonetheless, I found out there is a lot of work to do. I started by scraping every bit of paint that I could off of this door. The more you can scrape off, the less mess you have to deal with later. It looks like we're gonna have a mess either way. For this small project, I decided to use a liquid stripper. It's typically more messy than my preferred method of paint removal, which is an infrared heater. I'll show you in a separate video. This method is quite messy, but it's very effective. Once the paint was removed, it was ready to be sanded. Since I'm trying to preserve everything I can, it was a real drag to have to pull apart a lot of this old rotten framing, but it was just too far gone to be used. Looks like it's been hand planed to make it fit in its space. Well, that must have taken a lot of work. Once all the rotten stuff was removed, I started rebuilding. This time, instead of a stationary transom, we are dead level. I'm going to make one that opens up, just in case we wanted to have some air circulation on a nice day. Excellent. The door is complete with 2 coats of primer and 2 coats of top coat. Now I'll be applying 2 coats of the same product I used in the outdoor shower area, Wax-On, to this exterior wall. It didn't take very long, but made a really big difference. I had a hole to patch in the transom window where some old telephone lines came through, so I used these chopsticks from the Chinese joint down the street to fill in the hole. I just cut it up in little pieces, shoved them all in the hole, and poured some glue in there. My chopstick idea has worked quite nicely. Got to buzz off the rest flush and fill it in with some wood putty, and I think it'll just disappear. I found a local glass supplier in a nearby town of Aiken that custom cut this piece of 1/8-inch tempered glass for this transom window. They also sold me the points to keep it secure in the frame. Then I sealed it in with this tub of glazing I got from the orange store. Well, here it is, our new old door and working movable transom. One of these days I might seal this shut if we don't use it very often, but I like it the way it is. I think it looks really nice. The hardware I chose for the door includes this Slage brand handle, a Slage lock, and this doorbell. I found all 3 of these at the Habitat for Humanity Restore. The handle was $5, the lock was $5, and this doorbell was $1. I'm going to install that later, right there, when I have a 12-volt transformer available. For the opening transom, I picked out these slide locks from the Blue Store and these 2 small hinges. Each of these cost about $3 a piece, and the slide locks were about the same, about $3 a piece. That makes a total of $23 in hardware, and with the 2 coats of primer and 2 coats of top coat, I'll say that's about $25 in paint product, making the grand total for the whole project a total of $49. All the wood I used to replace this old trim was reclaimed from here in the building, and I am going to put 1 more coat of paint on this before it's all done, after all the dust has settled in the space. The next major projects that I'm going to work on up here are cleaning the walls up and restoring these old windows. When I'm ready to put a top coat on these windows, well, I'll address any kind of touch-ups the door needs and have it ready for that third and final coat. Speaking of those walls and windows, I think it's about time to get started on that.
So I can put a damn 2x.
On a random day a few weeks back, the fine gentleman at the Edgefield County Water Department showed up to replace the water meter. Due to a size difference between the old meter and the new meter, it caused me to have to replace all of the new piping that I had just installed. I wasn't disappointed though. This new meter is going to save us some money, and all of the piping that I had installed was still accessible, so I was able to replace it pretty quickly and without any hassle. I don't like doing jobs 2 times over, but in this case, it was okay. The only downside was getting my boots muddy in this trench. Okay, time for our water test. Everything's connected and I think we're ready to go. I'm more anxious about this water test than I was the first one. Here we go. Okay. All the way on. So far so good. No leaks. So I'm going to do a double check out here to make sure my connection point to the meter is not leaking, and we're good. No leaks, baby. I was finally able to get rid of this pile of dirt that had been sitting here for several weeks. I used some crushed up bricks I'd saved from the outdoor shower project as a base, and then filled in the hole with some concrete. After the water meter and incoming pipes were installed, the next project we wanted to take on was cleaning up the walls and ceiling in what will soon be our apartment upstairs. Today is a good one. We're going to be cleaning up the walls in here finally. I've been looking at these dirty walls, these old plaster walls for a long time. And although we're going to be keeping a lot of the plaster on the walls, a lot of the brick is going to get exposed. After a couple of days of making a total mess in this space, I've learned the best procedure of removing the plaster and then cleaning up the brick. Next, we're going to work on the chimney area and move forward here into the wall with the arched window and the 2 other boarded up windows. And then we'll work our way around and clean up the walls before we prepare for painting. I've already started the process in the back part of this upstairs. Cleaned off a lot of the bricks. I've discovered what was savable and what was not, thanks to a really great article by the National Park Service about the preservation of historical plaster. It gave some history. I found some other articles. I'll post the links to those down below in the description. But today we're going to be working on removing the plaster that is rotted and falling away from the walls, anything that cannot be repaired. That includes this very last piece of trim that was left intact, which we're going to have to remove today. I saved this for us to do together so we can see how this was installed. At the time that this building was built in 1898, some construction practices were changing, especially in the plastering part of construction. So this is a unique way that baseboard and other moldings and trim was installed prior to the early 1900s, late 1800s. This was an old time way of doing it, even back then. It had been around for about 100 years, and I'll show you some of the details of how this was all constructed. You see this whole panel is loose against the wall. Back in the 1800s, a different form of plastering was used than today. It used a lime-based plaster, which still is used in historical buildings. The lime-based plaster mixed with sand and a fibrous material, a lot of the times horsehair. That was what was used in this, horse or other types of animal hair. You can still purchase animal hair for historical preservation of plaster today. For this type of plaster, when it's coming away from the wall, if you have this in your home, if you have an older home, this is likely a thing that you have seen. There are ways to reattach this by putting an adhesive behind this, and there's attachments that are sold. They're like a nail with a big washer on the head that keeps it in place, and then you can patch up your cracks and so on to preserve the plaster. This is all found in the National Park Service instructions on preserving plaster. There's some other great articles out there from historical societies around the country. I've done a lot of research on this and decided that removing this is the best thing to do instead of trying to keep it on the wall. A lot of this is just so far gone. And it's because moisture has gotten between the brick and the plaster, and when brick has to breathe, and when the moisture exits the brick, the plaster will absorb that moisture, and over time it will cause it to come away from the wall like this. So we have to remove all this, and safely, because this is definitely 100% lead-based paint, a lot of chips here, and it's not these big flakes that are going to cause a problem, but the small particulates that are in the air. So you have to wear a respirator, and you want to be totally covered up to do this. So before I start removing any of these pieces, I'm going to suit up, and I'll show you some of the work that I already did in here so you can get an idea of what we're going for the rest of the space. On this wall, you can easily see the difference between the clean versus the uncleaned brick and the salvaged plaster still remaining on the wall. Today I'm going to be number 160. I found a couple of these jumpsuits at the Habitat for Humanity Restore for $3 a piece. No idea where they came from, but it does help in protecting from all these particulates and the bad stuff in the air. Okay, I'm ready. What we see here on this baseboard was a common practice in the late 1800s where they would install the trim first and then install the plaster, which is not the case today with what we use as drywall or even modern plaster methods. What we see here in this ledger board is how the plasterer knew the depth of the plaster to be applied, which typically was done in 3 coats. For the best results, it would be a scratch coat, a brown coat, and then a finish coat. You can see up close here just an eggshell's thickness of a finish coat, which was made of a slurry of mostly lime and aggregate. Something else we're going to see when we start taking this plaster off the wall are these little register pieces. They're little pieces of wood that can be, this is really destroyed by water, but we'll see a lot of these where there's these slots in the wall and wood chunks, and that's just for the plasterer to know the depth of plaster across the wall. It happens about every couple of feet. We'll see those, and I'm going to try to keep those in place. After most of the big chunks were cleaned up off the floor, I began grinding the walls with a soft wire brush on my angle grinder. A lot of people suggest not to do this in order to avoid damaging any of the old soft brick, but I found that it worked really well. It was very effective in cleaning the brick without any damage.
Pretty dusty.
After all the mortar was cleaned off of the bricks, I began scraping any loose paint off of the salvageable plaster we were leaving on the walls. I then used an 80 grit sanding pad on my 6-inch random orbital sander to remove any imperfections in the walls in preparation for cleaning and paint. This was probably the biggest dusty mess I've ever made in my life. All the dust is settled, everything has been totally cleaned, vacuumed up. If you were to see this space for the first time, you might not think that any work has been done up here. But if you've been watching these videos for a while, you'll recognize that this place is starting to take some shape. I think these walls look really good compared to what they used to, and we're almost to the point where we can start putting paint on the plaster that's left. We're not going to paint the brick, we're just going to paint the plaster. You also might recognize, if you've been watching these videos, that now this place is wide open, where before there was some walls in the way, some studs only. All the plaster was removed from those walls, luckily, but in the process of replacing the floor joists, which you'll see in an upcoming video, I had to take down all those walls to remove the weight up here. And that gave us a really good opportunity to have a wide open space to work in and not have to drag cords around walls and have things in the way. So it's been a really nice area to work in. But for now, I'm going to get started on restoring these windows and replacing some of the missing floorboards. Scraping and sanding these old windows is going to create some more dust up here, so I'm going to wait to wash the walls down in preparation for paint until all of these windows are totally restored. I've already started restoring a couple of the window frames in here, and I can tell you, it is going to create quite a bit of dust to finish up the rest of them. Thanks for joining me today, friends, here at the old abandoned bank. Appreciate your company on this collection of completed projects over the last couple of weeks. It's good having you here. I hope you look forward to a couple of new videos coming out in the next few days. I think you're going to enjoy them. I'll see you in the next video.